by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Or anything for David.
The problem is trying to talk about this problem. Sometimes on YouTube, they don't like that, especially on a live call, just like we're doing right now. Ransom Godwin joining me. I didn't realize I was on mute. I can't believe it. I try to be a nice guy, put it on mute before the show starts so you can hear things clanging in the background. I don't do that, but welcome to this beautiful blue home we call Earth, wherever you are, morning, evening, night. Spring approaches, days are getting longer, although in the Southern Hemisphere, days are getting shorter. It's all about the solutions. Truly it is. Functional solutions for the actual average person. Everything is spun so far out of what you consider normalcy that if you haven't seen it now, if people haven't seen it by now, the systems that we relied on, ED, plural tense, are going to continue to diminish. So it's going to be time for us to really think about solutions and take action collectively, those around you. But again, it comes down to it, Ransom. We're going to have to tiptoe around some issues on this whole fire thing and the chemical breakdown and long bond chains getting shortened and what was created out of that. So, I did a video on YouTube. It was only 23 minutes long because the original one that I did with Brighteon TV was 45 minutes long. I had to self-censor that much because apparently YouTube now is starting to strike channels and remove videos that don't kowtow 100% into what Norfolk Southern had stated on their accident record and what the EPA personally states now. If you do not follow that narrative down to the nth degree, it's very much like COVID. You remember how they removed anybody who had a prior alternative opinion? It's happening 2.0 with this thing with the rails here right now. Everything's fine. Water's fine, air's fine. If you say anything different, not fine. So as we discuss the issue tonight, to see where we sit in the grand scheme of things, realize there's natural cycles inbound that need to be distracted away from that are even greater than what just happened up on the rails in Ohio, even greater than the 30 or 40 factory fires in the last 2 weeks in the States. Even greater than the war increasing in the Ukraine and the crops not being grown in Ukraine, one of the major exporters on our planet of grains out to more developing third world nations. Faux pas. So as we look through this, What is the largest thing that is going to happen? That really what we're seeing by the man-made side is also a distraction, but onto the edge of destroying food to get you onto a digital rationing card and the ushering of central bank digital currencies / universal basic income. You do it when you're hungry, but you could ride on top of the natural cycle and amplify and magnify the effects. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So the man-made side of things that you're seeing right now, okay, that's one. You've seen a lot of it in the news, but we also want to talk about the natural cycles that are even the bigger player in the entire change of the society civilization that we see on this grand solar minimum reset. Ransom, thank you for joining me tonight. My bad, I had the mic on mute. I had a beautiful introduction. I can't believe it. And I didn't record either.
That's all right. We all knew that it was something good. This whole thing that's going on in the middle of the U.S., like you said, you got to tiptoe around it, walk on eggshells. So basically, we are at the 1984 point in which the powers that be can tell you that you don't know what you see, you don't know what truth is, war is peace, all of that stuff. We're at that point. All around the world, people are going to jail or being fined or punished or scrutinized, lots of different things just because they don't want to pretend with other people, because other people have their own ideas, they have their own beliefs, imaginations, and we're at the point of civilization where it doesn't matter how destructive the idea is. It seems that you have to pretend with them, and it goes from, let's see, how people describe themselves all the way to, events in reality that you can use your own deductive logic to look at and assess on your own. So, when you look at any number of events, which it's weird because we have to say the word event and thing that happens. We can't just say what it is that happens because what you were talking about there. But events happen, and you're supposed to pretend that they didn't happen, or that because someone in a quote unquote authoritative source of information tells you something, you have to believe it. There is no, I do my own research, or, maybe you have a field of expertise that you like to fall back on for, knowledge because you studied those things, or you just have common sense, which tells you, maybe you shouldn't drink the turpentine or whatever's going on. So we're at that point, and, maybe it's a good thing that we don't believe things, or maybe it's a bad thing that we don't believe things. But either way, soon I don't think you'll be able to deny what's going on. From the war in the Ukraine, where it's escalating, just like I said last time we were on air, we just came up on the 1-year anniversary of the Russian invasion of the Ukraine war theater, and I am calling it a theater of war because there's a lot of actors involved. But anyway, the U.S. believes Russia conducted a Satan II ICBM missile test while Biden was visiting the Ukraine. So, that's neato, right? But let's check where we're at. You want to talk about solutions. Are you lonely? Are you lonely out there with all of these events happening, feeling like you're alone in the way you think? Well, don't worry about it. If you haven't been sold on the reality that they're giving you, AI human romances are flourishing, and that's just the beginning, according to the designers and people that are into that. And if you've been having a heart problem, or you think you might in the near future have a heart problem, now you can rely on lifesaver scientists invent 3D robotic human heart just in time for the population. As we've noted before, mainstream media tells us that there is now a heart attack and or a stroke season. Maybe they go hand in hand. I don't know. But don't worry about it. Just in time for that, we have lab-grown hearts. We've got 3D robotic human hearts. And it looks like, and it pumps exactly like the real thing. So you won't even notice when you start changing over to a robotic form. And I'm talking about the next couple generations that are going to be living on Earth, because this will all be normal place after their, smaller population is running the Earth. Here from Mercedes-Benz, they say that they have built all of their new cars with supercomputing type performance. So it's like in every car with automated driving sensors. It's like you're sitting in there with a supercomputer. And, soon we won't even have to, think about what's going on. The chip in your head will just change the radio station to what the system wants you to hear. I mean, which show you wanted to listen to. Supercomputer. So we're going down the whole avenue of the things we talked about in the past, where I pointed out that algorithms, AI, is in charge of our nuclear arsenal. So I find it kind of weird that I come across articles like this in Today's World, February 23rd. So that's 223-2023. So 223-223, because there's no zeros in numbers. But anyway, should an algorithm control the nuclear launch codes? The U.S. says no, but what's funny about that is they already do that. They rely on a algorithm or AI to tell them when it's time to push the button. So the robot decides. And maybe we'll go back into the ages.
Hey, it's 2213 right now, Ransom.
2213, huh? 2223.
Yeah, once it gets to 2223, exactly 10 minutes from now, it'll be 2223, 223, 223.
Right. I think maybe we might have to start doing these operations like they did in the Bronze Age. I'm showing everybody a article from the Sun where they're talking about a rare type of brain surgery that was being performed 3,500 years ago, say archaeologists, and basically they cut perfectly. It looks like advanced technology in the remote past here, where they cut at a chunk of a person's skull, most likely to help them release the evil spirits. They might have heard voices from the brain implants back in the ancient past there. What do you think about that? Is that too far-fetched, or are we repeating the cycle now where your local shaman may have to cut a hole out of your head because you want to opt out of the program?
Oh, that was some ancient antiquitech they found from the Lemurian society buried in a cave that cracked after an earthquake. They walked in there and they found a full functioning laboratory, and that was actually a dental office, but they're misusing the equipment. We shall take their license. Just saying. Never know, these 4,500-year-olders, they're just cantankerous. Hard to get a hold of them. Keep them under control. Now, if I might, this is from the EPA.gov. So anything I say from this point forward is pure 100% science and chemistry fact. Pure and simple. So YouTube, we are talking about science purely and simply right here. What is a dioxin? Dioxin key facts. Now, why would I bring up the word dioxin? Well, they're persistent organic pollutants, or POPs, POPs. They're not forever chemicals, FECs. No. Very, very different. How dare you call it an FEC when it's truly listed as a POP? That's misinformation. So the chemicals that spilled in the Ohio derailment, vinyl chloride, butyls, etc., they're walking through the gray area after they split the hair open to be the invisible gray company. Because in truth, there are no more chemicals there that were on the original trains. I agree, there's not. I got to agree with the freight company or the rail company, because when they burned and incinerated everything, it turned into different chemicals, and the long chains were broken down into short chains. Like the tetrachlorodibenzofurands, if I may, the 2,3,7,8s, had broken down from those longer chains, shorter chains, and then the restructuring of the chlorine atoms. Wait, was that polyvinyl chloride? Was that vinyl chloride as in chlorine? Yes, it broke down into different types of dioxins. So the chemicals really aren't there anymore. They were transmuted during heat processes into something else. So we should be talking about, what did they turn into? Should be the question. But see, in the letter of the law, the original chemicals, they're no longer there. They're not. They're not there, so they're not liable, they're not culpable, because they're not there anymore in the previous form. The air, well, it cleaned out after the squall blew through for 2 straight days. So yeah, the air is clean. It truly is. Water contaminants, they were flushed down because a 2-day massive 50-mile-an-hour rainstorm came through and put all that fresh Arctic air behind it, but it blew everything else in front of it. So when they measured at the spot, indeed, it is clean. The water was clean too, because when they plopped their sensors in there, everything had been flushed downstream of the original chemical. They never tested for dioxins. They tested for vinyl chloride, et cetera, and the other 5 or 6 rail cars full of different, let's say, exotics. So when they tell you these things, they're absolutely telling you the truth. What they're not telling you is what that turned into and how they're not testing for that. And the thing it turned into, called a dioxin, for those of you who know Agent Orange, PCBs in that category of same toxicity, long-lasting half-lives. So what's the dioxin? What really occurred? What was made after this? So again, this comes from the Environmental Protection Agency, talking about transmutation of hazardous waste through fire and heat into dioxins. And that would be on the /dioxin/ learn about dioxin page from the EPA. Pure fact, pure science right here. These polychlorinated dibenzo P dioxins, there's 3 different classes of them, and they're skipping school. They didn't show up today. The PCDDs, you're going to hear about this one. The polychlorinated dibenzofurans, the PCDFs also. And then there's this class of certains, which is a multi-mix after you break down and fire. The polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, right there you go again. See, these PCBs are dioxins too. So if I just say dioxin, you might not get the real feeling, but if I say PCB, everybody jumps back 10 feet. Oh, that was in the generators. Oh, that makes the catfish die. Well, that makes the catfish mutate DNA. Oh, PCBs, they're terrible. Yeah, well, you're in the same class of dioxins of what had occurred after they burned everything. That's the same class. It's just there's 3 different classes of it, and it's categorized as a dioxin, PCBs. So you get it where we're sitting here. That transmuted through fire into something else. Now, industrial activities, they stopped producing this stuff in the 1960s, understanding when there was almost no regulation at all how bad this stuff was, how toxic it was, what the chemical contamination levels were. But these hazardous air pollutants and the hazardous waste combustors in the Clean Air Act, I don't know how they got away with lighting this on fire. They burned it. Now, if it's in a waste combustor of a hazardous materials waste, let's say there was a job site and they turned down an old building or whatever, and they came across some hazardous chemical, they would take it to a hazardous waste incinerator. Now, they have a way to deal with those dioxins. You're not even allowed to burn anything that would create or has the possibility of co-creating and coming down into smaller chains, shorter chains, and turning into dioxin left into the environment. Toxic Substances Control Act, the TSCA, Section 8. Talk about who holds it, who imports it, who processes, distributes it, and the Emergency Planning and the Right to Know Act within that. And you can go back to the history of dioxins, where it really got deep into the research was in the early 1980s, like 1984. The criteria is so low, it's parts per billion are the hazardous levels. And now you got to put in the perspective here. And then they talk about Camp Lejeune, which was a Marine training area, and people were getting sick from the water and headaches, like long-lasting diseases from this. It was several hundred gallons of PCBs and other, quote, dioxins. So I'm trying to put it into perspective for you. It's terrible what happened to Marines. Nobody knew what was going on, and now they have long-term effects. For a few hundred gallons of this, on the rail tracks, they had 500,000 gallons of total chemical that was lit, and the heat conversion process turned it into something else. The dioxins, and that spread all the way. And I shall say, HYSOP, HYSOP, that's a NOAA feed and a NOAA instrument following air, flows up to 20,000 foot flight altitude. Also established science NOAA website there with the HYSOP airflow models, YouTube. showed that the black matte emission of just pure black looked like a volcanic eruption. It had its own black color code as being the densest aerosol. Was tracked to about 15,000 feet, heading up through both Great Lakes, up into Ontario, over the main corn growing area in Ontario. When the wind switched direction and it headed right over upstate New York. And the black matte continued around to swirl all the way to Northern Virginia. And in the very beginning, as the fire was tapering off, so was the amount of emission. But as that swung around, the wind swung south, southeast, straight south, and peppered part of West Virginia and Northwest Virginia with lesser emissions. Now, this is all just following the airflows across that, but you have to realize that was a very, very wide area across multiple states in some of the fertile lands of our planet. Dioxins, you can't farm there anymore. That is absolutely one of the things they talk about. Animal husbandry, to have cow and dairy cattle uptake on grass grown with dioxin-laden soils is a 0% possibility, and don't even ask, can't do it. And anything else farming in terms of corn specifically, because of the uptake through the roots, more corn more than any other crop. Plus it's inedible directly from the kernels that store that there. So you're looking at corn, dairy, and anything cattle. You can't graze, you can't farm. Now that's from the toxicological research is from 1984 until today, and this is 2022. Okay, so it's not they've updated a lot of things since that accident, by the way, so I'm always really looking at the update dates on this thing here. So Ransom, I'm going to leave you with that. That was pure fact. That was pure science. That was pure chemistry coming directly from the EPA. So YouTube should have no problem with that, because that is pure fact and science. Now, what do you say that? Now you're looking for what it turned into. So that's where we get into the gray area.
Well, I always say dioxins are better than just one oxen, you know. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's funny that you said that about the chlorine. You know, the train accident that happened near Detroit was carrying chlorine gas. And, you know, some really trippy, I guess, coinky dink is a few years ago, there was a show called Life Without People, or maybe it was like Earth After People or something like that on the Discovery Channel. I think it was Earth After People. One of the episodes was talking about a chlorine gas plant and what would happen. And I brought this up before because it's just, you know, considered a fact. If people are not there to maintain certain things for whatever reason, things break and they let out chemicals. And one of them was talking about a chlorine, maybe it was a bleach manufacturing plant or something. Anyway, they were talking about how tanks would rust and eventually they would start leaking, putting out this gas. And one of the things they were talking about is not only would the initial, you know, kind of wave of gas coming from this destroy lots of forest, but that it would break down into other compounds continuing on. So that would be a cool episode for y'all to, you know, go look up. I think it was Earth After People or something like that. Anyway, science fiction. But what you were talking about is facts. And, you know, I don't want to get too woo-woo, but, you know, with that going on in the background, just kind of keep that in mind. And I was looking at some pretty unique articles right here. Camp Lejeune water, I think you brought that up, contamination, health issues. This is back in the day. I think you just explained that pretty good. If you go over to the va.gov disability eligibility hazardous materials exposure page and / Camp Lejeune water contamination, it gives you a whole list of unique, you know, attributes and gifts, if you want to call it that, that you might get from absorbing some of these compounds. I'm not going to read them off. They're on screen right there, so that's cool. But if you were just thinking about, you know, like if you were a movie director and you wanted to portray the months leading up to the zombie apocalypse or World War II or not World War II, World War III, or, you know, any apocalyptic future in a fiction realm, you might, you know, run some artificial ads or not ads, articles and news clippings, you know, kind of as a intro to your movie, so to speak. So let's pretend we're doing that and go down these neat headlines here. Here's one. If you're expecting a lot of packages in the future, you might not get those, because inside the employee revolt rocking Amazon. And here we go. Speaking of chemicals, Wall Street backs new class of psychedelic drugs. Isn't that neat? But let's skip over here to the good stuff. Here it is. Russia drops ominous warning about attack on second country. Ukraine war, UN condemns Russian invasion ahead of their anniversary, because they're already expecting it. Here's a good one right here. This is in the good old United States, which is funny. There's some graphics out there kind of explaining this, but here's the headline: Rotting alive, zombie skin rotting trank. Drugs take over streets of America as experts warn there's no medication to reverse overdoses of this kind. And basically what it is like a drug that they used to have just a decade or so, they were calling it like the crocodile drug. It rots off your skin, and it's weird because there's little animations of where this fentanyl laced tranquilizer came from. And it just there's lines from the US border pointing out to several cities that just so happen to be run by a specific party. And that's where all of this is there. So you got the zombie apocalypse, you got winter storms, so more chaos, shut down of much of Portland. You have, let's see here, hundreds of thousands without power due to massive winter storm. And I know we've harped on it coming up through the fall about, what do you do when the power goes out? Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are continually going through this epidemic of what do I do when the power goes out? Now, usually they fix it in a couple of days, but with the way things are going, it may be out for a long time. One of these times it goes out. U.S. to quadruple troop presence in Taiwan, simultaneously ratchets pressure over China-Russia ties. And then here's the good headlines. The war in Ukraine is the end of the world. World War II style rationing of meat, clothing, energy needed to fight climate change, says UK academics. So these are the post-apocalypse news headlines. But don't worry about starving or, government rations, because even though those companies are failing that make lab-grown meats and stuff, they are still pushing it. The billionaires, the elite, are not giving up on their idea, so they're going to keep pushing it. Here it is. From lab-grown milk to sewage beer, exploring a brave new world of food. Notice the title there. It just goes on and on like that. I mean, a colossal tidal wave of new shipping containers about to strike, container ships about to strike. So there's more for your food to show up. And don't worry about it if you're kind of worrying about the zombie apocalypse. It's not just those people that are about to get off center, meaning the drug addicts, but also the people that are customers of pharmaceutical drugs, as they're about to be in short supply, but only the ones that are critical to life-saving. They're about to ban off-label uses for drugs also, according to Zero Hedge here. So that means, you can't.
They're going to ban what? I'm sorry.
It's here's the headline: Doctors at new FDA authority to ban off-label uses for drugs. In other words, there may be some punishment coming if you don't use their products according to the way they want you to. Now, I'm not going to point out that there was a recent experience in the public memory just 2 years ago where people were trying to use certain medications for other things that they didn't necessarily or weren't invented for, and they might or might not have worked on them. But all that's going to come to an end. You're not going to be able to, doctor yourself or someone else. And, you already get in trouble. Like, say your neighbor fell down off the ladder, broke his leg, and the bone's sticking through. If you get down there and you put that bone back in there and you wrap it up with the tourniquet, like we've talked about before, you might just get in trouble for operating, without a license or performing tasks without the proper certification permission from the establishment. So what a bizarre world. If you were going to, like I said, show a little preview or intro into a dystopic future of an apocalypse movie, all you'd have to do is show today's headlines in order, without even adding any sensationalism to them or anything. These are the headlines: World War III, zombie apocalypse. I mean, literally, an apocalypse of people that are addicted to substances that are coming from international waters as part of an ongoing world war.
Yeah, well, the Good Samaritan laws would protect you, in an emergency like that. But if you were going every day to help somebody in their home, that might be different. But emergencies, the Good Samaritan laws can go either way. Like you have to help somebody in need in an emergency until, better help can arrive and they stabilize a person on an ambulance. There's some states where you can get in trouble if you're just standing there and watch somebody bleed out and you didn't even try to help. You're going to get in trouble for not helping. So hopefully the Good Samaritan laws would cover some of that. And you got to think about off-label uses of medication like modafinil. It's called the limitless drug. Well, it's used for narcolepsy and those who, work late night shifts. A lot of people who, need to be up the entire night, but just as awake as you would be during the day, use modafinil. But an off-label use of that is the limitless pill to get you to focus on your work for endless hours at a time and not be distracted. Hope that one doesn't go away. But think about this, Ransom, for a second. Dioxins, again, I'm going to bring you back here because I'm going to give you the news in advance on how this is going to work. I can already see it so clearly. It's almost like all I'm doing is looking at the picture in my mind or the story in my mind, and I'm just relating it back to you as I see it in a visual image in my mind here. So we got to go back to the dioxins first. Now, the dioxins are highly toxic. They cause reproductive and developmental problems. And YouTube, this comes from the World Health Organization newsroom fact sheet on dioxins and the effect on human health off the World Health Organization's own website. So dioxins are highly toxic and can cause reproductive development problems, damage the immune system, wink, wink, interfere with hormones, and cause cancer, mainly in the liver and kidneys. Now, why would I even bring that thing up here? Because remember how I told you there were 3 different classes of the dioxins. So let's go through them again. Type number 1, polychlorinated dibenzopyrdioxin, or otherwise known as PDDs. Remember, you're going to start to hear about this in the news, and they're going to split the hair, not once, but twice, but 3 times. We're going to have 1/4 of a hair split in the gray zone on this one. The polychlorinated dibenzofurans, the PCDFs, okay? And then we have the other types, which is a mishmash of many polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, which encompasses a huge range of different compounds. So here's where it is. The EPA classified these different dioxins as quote-unquote probable cancer-causing agents. One dioxin in particular, the tetrachlorodibenzopyrdioxin, TCDD, is a known human carcinogen. All the other dioxins are considered probable. Not proven, probable. Oil wells or oil claims are probable and proven reserves possible. So it leaves one category that they're going to start juggling with here. So irregardless if they burned everything off and it came in and transmuted into different chemical compounds, all of dioxins, PCB being the most famous, but others which we just listed here, of all of that, there's only one that's been proven so far to cause cancer. So watch them walk down this road of, there were toxins, there were dioxins, but there's only one. Prove it. And this is the way it's going to go. Because the food scare can be used in many directions. So you got to walk on the 2 different planks out here, both of them full of sharks. On the left side there, plank A, and the other plank full of hungry crocodiles who haven't eaten in a week and a half on plank B over there. Well, the first one is you come out to the world and you say, whoa, my bad. We burned up 500,000 gallons of mixed chemical, and it turned into all these different types of dioxins and different classes of them. It's spread over multiple countries, multiple Great Lakes, multiple states, and that area where it was really the densest, we're not going to be able to farm there for 5 years or 10. And then what? Well, the markets go crazy. There's no more futures market because you just took part of the United States agricultural base offline, and you just took part of Canada's corn base out of line indefinitely. Anything associated with dairy and cattle grazing on the grass that would uptake that and produce the milk, which would then make the cheese or the butter, you couldn't do that because it would be dioxin-laden foods. Chicken, nope, no, there's no more outdoor. Everything's under tin roof. Everything's feedlot. Everything's feed house, period. All brought in. But wait, you couldn't use the water, so where does that come from? So that's the kind of picture they would need to paint if they came true with the information, and then we need to move a lot of people out of these areas because you can't live there, you can't use the water, you can't farm. So then all these communities and farmers, they'll have to sell their farmlands, which the government will buy, probably below market. And this will be the whole story as we march right through the catastrophic ozone depletion event coming in August of this year. Or they could come clean, or they could deflect this and, not tell that, hey, we can't plant. The economic markets are probably a little more stabilized. But then there's the possibility of point B, which I was asked about, and I was like, you can't do that to people. And I was told, okay, well, thanks for your input. They don't tell anybody. They let all the farmers grow as normal, and then that toxicity spreads through the entire food chain across all of the foods distributed in America. And importers of United States-based agriculture suddenly put a huge giant wall up and say nothing comes from the States because we don't know if those tomatoes and those eggplants came from the dioxin-contaminated soils of Ohio or if they were grown in California, where a full agricultural embargo of the United States and Canada corn crop. As the sickness sweeps through the land, because everybody will have the same exact things in the bodily problems at the same exact time, because everybody will consume it all at the exact same time because it'll be in the food chain. Now, that's why you're not supposed to eat in certain shellfish or certain types of tuna or certain types of barracuda with the cyclotoxins, etc. It bioaccumulates. That's why you're only supposed to have shellfish to a certain extent. Some people, they hit the allergy and they can't come back. So that they're going to go one of the two directions on that. But the whole thing is the companies are going to be fighting this tooth and nail, going, we already cleaned up everything. There's no more of the chemicals from the cars on there that we were transporting, which is true. It's not. It turned into something else, which was, polluting and well known through considerable amount of research that it causes cancer. The tetrachloride dibenzene, dibenzo P-dioxins, TCDDs. All right, now while you're distracted with all of this talk going on, and the Ukraine not planting this year, and the war kicking off even heavier and even less fertilizer, okay, that's all distraction set A. It's a nice 5-volume set squeezed together, set A. Now, really, now, see, that's all human-made distraction there. So you have to ask yourself, what would the distraction be from, might you ask? Or what might it add on to as a natural cycle to get even a bigger fear base out, stimulate more fear, and ratchet it up about to a level 15 from a level 10 where we sit now? Now, the dioxin scare would ratchet it up to a level 15. Okay, but we want level 20. We're greedy. So we're going to throw in the catastrophic ozone hole and the catastrophic ozone depletion leading to the largest expansive ozone hole ever, ever, with UVB ground-touching, ravaging radiation just burning the crops and melting the sea ice to zero almost across the southern oceans. Catastrophic. And when I say that, this year's ice loss because of the UVB increases because of that same event of ozone breakdown, because of the Hunga Tonga eruption. It dropped off a cliff, and then it dropped off another cliff as it hit a cliff bouncing down to roll off another cliff. That's how fast it cascaded to nothing this year with sea ice. But that didn't onset until, the regular ozone hole is August, September, October. So every year you have to realize that this is like a breath of the planet. So think about our planet breathing. And every August, September, October, November, the way it breathes or exhales, this giant ozone hole opens over the southern hemisphere. Supposedly blamed on chlorofluorocarbons back in the hairspray days of the 80s and your air conditioner. All right, so that's been good. The ozone hole. Now, it had been repairing itself since the year 2000, which was the widest ozone hole at 30,000 square kilometers. No, so, excuse me, 30 million square kilometers. 30 million. Now, during that time, there were two other bounce periods. One was 2015 and one was the year 2000, where there was exceptionally low amounts of ozone in the column, so massive UVB penetration to the ground. And you know what? Magically, there was catastrophic ice dropping off a cliff, off to another cliff, bouncing down off to another cliff as it skyrocketed straight down. So the more UVB, there's a direct correlation to the amount of Antarctic sea ice loss in like super rapid fashion. Visual for you, putting ice into a microwave oven. That's what we're going to. So now put this in picture. Now it's going to be, the ozone hole, I would imagine, would be way larger than the 2000 ozone hole. And it's going to continue to break down as we move forward because there's more ice crystals in the mesosphere for the exact same. The O3 ozone molecule gets ripped apart. One of the ions gets stripped by a chlorine atom. And here we are. Ransom's talking about chlorine, and I'm trying to explain chlorine 50 miles above our heads, stripping an oxygen atom off of the ozone molecule and breaking down ozone, because suddenly you have O2, which is oxygen, and the chlorine stripped one of those, and the bromine's in there on the fight too, going, I want an oxygen. So you're getting like BO variants and CLO variants on that, meaning massive, massive, massive breakdown of ozone, because there's more ice crystal clouds than there has been, at least in the last 200 years, possibly longer, because the ash and Tambora eruption of 1815 was that ash and particulate and sulfur dioxide, not water vapor. A huge difference. The medium's different, but this time it was water vapor going up there. So the amount of ice crystal clouds, this could be a once in a 2,000 year, ejection into the atmosphere. The catastrophic, and I want to say this, this is a no BS assessment. Like I did a whole report for the dairy industry on barley losses. The amount of UVB damage that it will be done to the barley crop in the southern hemisphere is absolutely going to tip over the apple cart for the feed industry, for the dairy and the cattle. Now, that was the whole thing, is like, if you're going to export out of this particular area in South Africa, or if you're in the Buenos Aires area and that's where your outbound port is and that's where your main acquisitions come from, or maybe that's the wrong term, acquisitions in terms of buying a company, but your sourcing, your procurement, if it comes from that area, you're going to need to think about different areas. And, New South Wales as well, and Australia, these are massive declining areas already with barley. So when the UVB hits, they're going to go, catastrophic, down, 70% declines in yield. This is what's happening in August, September, October, November of this year coming up. But it's not just good. Now you understand the science. We had a big, huge, gigantic volcanic eruption, the biggest in 200 years, a year ago in January of 2022. But because it was in water and it was over Tonga and there wasn't like a huge amount of cities ripped apart, it was just a big explosion in the middle of the ocean. Well, that big explosion took all that water in the ocean and added 10% more water vapor into the atmosphere in one day. Yeah, I'll say that again, because I noticed somebody shook their head and said, what? The Hunga Tonga eruption added 10% more water vapor into our atmosphere in one day. A huge amount of that went into the driest layer of the atmosphere in the mesosphere. And all those ice crystal clouds that are literally 10,000 to 100,000 times more are now responsible for the breakdown of ozone at just the most runaway possible exponential clip that you can think of. So the losses and the declines in the ozone measured in like the scariest thing ever in the year 2000 You know, there was no water vapor in the mesosphere as measurable as it is today by an order of magnitude of 10,000 times more up there. Like what we're about to hit into is there's going to be a massive natural radiation event across the southern part of our planet. And they're going to really rip through the crop yields down there, which will cause global shortages in food. Okay, so that's subset B. Awesome. Now couple these two together. You got the full runaway effects of all these things happening in the northern hemisphere. The southern hemisphere ag fails at the same time. There is going to be a very acute food pinch here coming up. And hungry people do strange things. So then, you know, if hungry people are starving, families are starving, you can get them on a digital rationing card, central bank digital currencies, and universal basic income. But see, you need to ride on top of the natural cycle. That's the whole thing. It's like whoever knows this information has way more advanced information than any of us doing this grand solar minimum research. Like they have wired it down to the point where they understand the onset intensity of the cycle on the natural side, but plan these events on the man-made side years in advance to happen lockstep with the natural amplification, which is just so mind-boggling. It really is. Like we don't even know these changes are coming until they're here, and you finally assess them as to where we sit in the onset, moving through these magnetic field changes to 2024 and on. But who's already gamed that out to set these things up years in advance for all these type of industrial accidents? It is just insane. Like what type of supercomputing power do you need to actuate that? So Ransom, I've been rambling, man. My bad. I was just trying to explain two ideas that are rolling here because they're going to ride on top of the natural cycle, and we're seeing it in both ways. You can see it clearly, and you can see how the lawyers are going to try to dissect of what's a known or not known carcinogen, and we're going to sit there focused on that while the southern hemisphere cooks. Well, maybe went off and took a break there. That's okay. I ramble sometimes. Ransom?
No, I'm here.
Okay, yeah, I was done. I was just my go, man.
No, I was saying I love my microwave dinner. So what you trying to tell me is, Putin knew that volcano was going to blow up. When he saw it blow up, he's like, you know what? Let's start World War III. That's the right time. No, I'm just kidding. But it does seem weird that a year ago, all kinds of stuff was happening that we're feeling the repercussions of now. A lot of them we told you about, including the shrinking of the food market that's going to be happening worldwide. Obviously, here's some very interesting article that I read at Zero Hedge. It's called "Does Gold Really Preserve Purchasing Power? The Case of High-End Suit." And basically what they're talking about is, a long time ago, you could buy a suit for $20, and it was about 1.7 ounces worth of gold, the price there. If you fast forward to today, a good suit costs you about $2,000, and the gold is worth $1,800 or so. I'm not sure what it is right now. But anyway, you can see that gold kept its value that entire time, and it's equal in today's market as it was then. However, the $20 bought you something that now costs $2,000. So just put that in perspective there. So I thought that was a really good way to put that. And then you're talking about, beyond stuff we've already talked about, decreasing the amount of food that's going to be produced. And then you see headlines like this: parents increasingly move back in with their kids. What's going on? And then you see other articles about kids that never leave their parents' house. Ransomware attack on Giant Dole temporarily shutters U.S. production. That's those people that make all the nice pineapples in the cans and whatnot.
Well, that was everything. You realize part of the entire United States food supply was suspended during that time.
Yeah, it seemed like, and we've talked about it before, it's every angle that it seems that there is an indicator that things are about or near collapse if they're not collapsing right now, which I think they are. Here's another headline from Shift Gold: total household debt charge, biggest rise in 20 years. So for the first time in 20 years, we're back into the debts that we were just getting over. If you remember all the turmoil that was going on in the stock market during the Clinton years, and things were about to, real close to busting at that time. But don't worry, we had 2001 happened there, so everything kind of got balanced out. And then you come to right now, which there's so many similarities between 2001 and 2023. It's amazing when you start looking into it. Just for one, the topic we were talking about earlier about authoritative sources telling you what's safe and not safe. Now, if you go look back in the track record of some of these organizations, like say the EPA or the FDA, you will find a bunch of oops. One of those being September 11th, 2001, where they told everyone, don't worry about it. It's okay. Go along as usual. Do your thing. Don't worry about all that thick layer of dust that's on every building car and everybody that's being washed around in the rain and things like that. And back to what you were talking about, I'm not really worried about that because, our government would never tell us things, that's not true. And I think they totally have it under control, sarcasm intended. But here's this cool link from the EPA: persistent organic pollutions, a global issue, a global response. This is an agreement in 2001 in the Stockholm Convention. Participating governments agreed to take action to reduce or eliminate the production, use, or release of certain of these pollutants, the POPs, the persistent organic pollutants there. Not that that has anything to do with anything that's, currently happening, but as you can see, the food is not being produced like it once was, and all indicators are showing shrinking economic markets, increasing debt, all across the board. So I don't know how else to take that. And then, at the simultaneous time, almost like it's coordinated, they're passing new laws that won't allow you to use things for other things, as I was showing there with the FDA deciding, what can be used for what and when and where and how. So this is a dystopic future. It's kind of putting it mildly, and they're incrementing it so well that people, are increasing exponentially getting used to bad news. And that is a good example that you kind of pointed out. The Hunga Tonga explosion happens and everybody's like, wow, oh, they invaded Russia. Wow. We have a pandemic. Wow. It's World War III. Wow. How many times do they wow the public? And if you've been noticing, not to get woo-woo before we go into the break, but have you noticed the push for the idea that not just microbial life is out there, but that we're about to talk to little green men any day now. Like I'm seeing it on all the mainstream medias, every streaming platform that offers a free kind of cable type stuff. There's one on PlayStation, smart TVs have them. I've been going around looking at them. And these are thousands of different channels that have the same 100 programs on, with the same 100 experts on, rearranged in different shows on different channels. And the UFO thing happens to be one of those. You see the same faces on every channel talking about the same thing. And these are mainstream media outlets pushing these, like the History Channel, the Military Channel, stuff like that. And these are entities that are in part owned and operated by the Pentagon. So, blowing away Operation Mockingbird style news, even the entertainment is all pushing you in one direction. That is that you're going to have to get used to rationing, reduction of lifestyle. And you know what? If you don't agree, we might just have to have an endless black budget project to keep you protected down here on Earth. Think about it. It's genius if they do it, because just like every other program any government on Earth has ever done, they steal money for their own projects. So if you could tell the public, look, there's extraterrestrials that might be nefarious and they're flying around our skies and we just don't know what to think about it. But if you give us $19.99 for this limited time offer, we can keep you protected into the near future. So we'll just need that $19.99 about, every month or so, and we might increase it without telling you about it. But don't worry about it. For the foreseeable future, we'll protect you. And this is something that you can't verify for yourself. And we talk about that constantly, like who's right with these facts, who's right with these facts, whose opinion's right, what really happened when it went down. This is the format of the new political system, but not only that, the media system, to keep two people in two groups always, so that they're never in agreement. And if they could pull something like this, You know, think of the other things that they pulled on the public. This isn't that far-fetched, but it would be a never-ending supply of black budget money that you could never verify, because none of us are going to get into a spacecraft, fly up there, and see if there's really aliens flying around.
Yeah, and we'll come back from the break. We'll talk about the record cold across South America and how these dovetail into full distraction, because you're going to find out they didn't warn you. Then you're going to be angry.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
I wanted to talk about hand-cranked radios for just a second because I think they're incredibly important. I myself, I did hours and hours of research on the best hand-cranked radio that could also be a phone charger, emergency light, be able to listen to radio stations, the NOAA weather station in case something happened and you were power out, you could still know what the weather was coming. I personally own this one, the Eaton Red Cross FRX3. It's all hand cranked, and there's a small solar panel on top of it. So it's multiple options for recharging, including plug-in. So if something were to happen, hand cranking is the next best option. I would love solar, but it might be a cloudy day. You might be inside a house, but you're going to have to create the power somehow. You hand crank it, and ergonomically, it slides right in like a book on a bookshelf. I can't believe how long the battery charge lasts on this thing. Even if you leave it up somewhere, like I say, on a bookshelf or in a closet for 6 months, it still has almost a full charge after that period of time.
These crank lights and radios are a must-have. The fact is, if you live anywhere where there's going to be weather, you're going to want to know what's going on. You're going to want to be able to see. And not only that, you're going to want to be able to charge your devices so that you can communicate if the power is out. This is something that you should have if you live anywhere where there's tornadoes, hurricanes, blizzards, etc. It's not whether or not the power is going to go out. It's just when, you know, that's going to happen. So these are something that you should have handy with you in your car and your backpack. 2 or 3 of them actually would be a good thing to have in several places so that you know that you're going to be able to have light, you're going to have information, and maybe communication. Those are 3 main things that you need. And plus, it's cool. You can listen to the radio, which makes the time go by if you're waiting for anything, waiting for the power to come back on. You're going to want to keep your mind occupied, and you're going to want to be able to see what you're doing and also be able to communicate if there is the ability to communicate, and you don't want your devices to be dead when that happens.
In an emergency, you would know where people were moving to. For example, out here in East Tennessee, we have massive wildfires sometimes, and they'll be on the radio broadcasting exactly where the fires are moving. And this is off of what you consider like your AM, FM channels that you would get on your car radio. Depends on which frequency that they're using for that, but they will absolutely tell you where emergency resources are stationed. So if you have to abandon your car, you could be able to get to another place as long as you know the roads, or you might have a map. You'll be able to get to some help or main roads where there's emergency vehicles transiting up and down there. Have this on the go, that it's be able to put it in your hand and still listen to something. It's very lightweight as well. What happens with your communications, or even listening to something, to be able to understand what's going on in the environment around you? And that's the key to surviving. And Ransom, I know you said this a few times, is understanding your environment, being able to manipulate your environment, and being able to move through that environment to get yourself to safety, to reassess the situation.
Not only that, this is one of the cheapest ways to have insurance, so that, you know, whatever happens, if you're on the move, if you have to grab your bag and go, or if you're just at home trapped when the power's out, not only do you know what's going on, but you know if the situation is going to worsen. Imagine all those people that were in several of the different hurricanes that we've had the last couple of years where the power was out. There were a lot of people that didn't know that was coming, and unfortunately they're no longer with us. But I'm sure that people that were prepared and had some radio, they knew where to go. They knew where the relief aid was going to be. They knew which directions the storms were coming, and they knew which directions the water was coming from. So this is a must-have for anybody that wants to know what's going on, and also just having the light.
And you can click on the link in the description box below. And remember, any purchase that you make with the links, whether it be through the podcast in the description box or on the videos across the multiple platforms after we stream, helps us keep this type of information and this show on air. so we can continue to bring information and share this information so then you can share with others. And this is truly how it's going to be, is sharing of information, forming communities, and have others that also have some of the same information so we can work as a group versus being on your own alone. That's going to make a huge world of difference, sharing information in communities.
If you wanted to start prepping and taking it serious to get some of these very inexpensive tools that are necessities, why not be prepared for what might happen? Click some of the links, help yourself.
If you appreciate this type of information, click on that link in the description box below. Support our broadcast, our continued mission of bringing you information that can enhance our lives, make our lives more comfortable as we move through this transition. Many Ice Age conversations. David DuByne right here with Ransom Godwin. Now, before we go on the break, I was trying to weave two different ideas together of the natural losses from the Hunga Tonga eruption affecting southern hemisphere crop production, all the events we see across the northern hemisphere, which are leading to diminished yields as well. So you'd start to look for signs. If it really was, if anything, I'm talking about crop losses and, unusual weather patterns, disturbing crop yields down in the southern hemisphere, we should see signs. So remember, in the southern hemisphere, they're still in the edge of summer going into fall right now. Like those last sunny days, they're warm, but at night you can feel it gets a little bit cooler, and you can almost feel it's getting a little cooler. You're kind of at that edge. The leaves didn't really change yet, but in a couple of weeks they might get ready to start changing. You're just at that edge of the season, just like us. We're in spring. We're just at the edge of going into spring. Well, they're going into fall down there. So at the end of summer here, we got record historical cold across South America. Argentina breaks 30 stations, or 30 weather stations. And Ransom, I'm going to send this for you. This is off the watchers here, so let me if you could jump over to, or let me find you over here, because I think it's important to take a look at some of these different things. Ransom, I'm going to send you this link here in the watchers so you can throw that up on the screen. But as we see, 30 stations broke their monthly all-time record, coldest ever cold record in Argentina. And Paraguay broke the all-time national cold record for the month and set in 1966 by half a degree. Brazil set several records. Uruguay also set new hourly minimums for the month, which was 5.7 degrees Celsius when it should be in the high teens. These temperature stations are directly over all the grain growing areas of the barley, the wheat, and the corn. So these are the same areas I've been tracking with the extra precipitation since February of last year. I'm keeping total records on precipitation by country by month, and the temperature itself, anomalies only from the 30-year average by country by month across all of the southern hemisphere countries. And Appalachian, thanks for the help on that right there. A lot of times we can't talk again. A lot of these things I would love to go in deeper depth with tonight. I can't. We're streaming up on a few platforms that we should just blow them to the wind and go talk about the plans of the demise of the numbers of people on the planet. So if you support free speech, because you have to get to this, these things we're talking about are going to continue to amplify. And the venues to be able to speak about these more freely in the 1984 clown show we call Earth Right Now. Free speech is valuable. Consider a donation right here, revolution.radio, keeping us on the air live Thursday nights, 10 p.m. to midnight. Consider a donation right up there, tab on the top left, donate. If you feel free speech is something worth keeping on the air. Now, as we go forward here with the Southern Hemisphere crop losses, they are going to be widespread. And, that'll be in a few months. You'll start hearing about this way below expectations on the yields from the USDA, which is the United States Department of Agriculture, CONAB, CONAB, which is the Brazilian equivalent of the crop forecasting Now, as the atmosphere starts to shift, you will absolutely begin to see more hail events. Now, I'm predicting a year without a summer still. I still stick to that. Even though we're in this warm spell in February, I still stand with what I have said this last 6 months, even 7, that the Northern Hemisphere is going into a year without a summer, which will again reduce planting and yields across wide swaths of the New England states and over across Europe, mainly in France, Germany, and northern Spain. Parts of Italy over to Slovenia as well. Now, the only reason I would say that is the year without a summer, the 1816 aftermath of the Tambora eruption in 1815. The jet streams changed their flow, and it did not come from the Gulf as it normally does, and heat and head over and keep that warm flow over into Europe. What it did is it took on the exact same polar vortex dipping all the way through the summer. Nothing ever locked in place. The jet streams never moved. They allowed those deep, deep lows from the Arctic to come all the way up through July. And then they returned again in August with the early freezes and snows in August. They had less than 1 month of a grow season. From the first frost to the last frost was approximately 1 month during the year without a summer. So that would be you'd have to have an ultra fast 30-day crop or bring everything indoor or grow it in a different part of the world. Now, see, this year without a summer, unless you've done the research, you wouldn't really know the exact same spots. So go again with me. If the dioxins had ruined farmland in Ohio and Pennsylvania and they say they couldn't plant, all the thing in the whole world would be focused on this area. Like Northeast U.S., you can't plant. But what if it extended through the Northeast, like literally through New England? And then it became a thing like, there's dioxins everywhere, no planting in New England this year. So you would never know that there were massive crop losses up there due to the year without a summer because there would be nothing planted. So there would be no yield declines to measure against the averages. But again, you would still take massive, massive, massive amounts of food growing potential in areas offline to zero versus 70% declines in yield. You would still get 30%, but this new way might be it's going to be zero. All of the Northeast, everything from Ohio over out through Maine. Nope, no planting this year. Wild blueberries can't harvest, could be contaminated, whatever. So when the year without a summer hits, this reformation of jet streams, it'll just nobody will notice it. It'll be cold, but they just won't notice it. Everything will be in chaos. They'll flip it off. They'll be talking about the ozone thing. The whole ozone thing will relate to the year without a summer thing. And the contagion there will be so vast. And when reports come in with France and Germany, extreme cold, 6-7 degrees Celsius under the normal, then it becomes a worldwide thing. And we got the Southern Hemisphere offline, the whole UVB scare. The only place that will be left would be the equatorial regions, 20 north to 20 south. Maybe 25 or 22 north to 22 south. Everything else will be completely taken offline. Food grow zone will be, then the huge amounts of shortages start. And then there's an offering of a digital rationing card accompanied with central bank digital currency and also universal basic income. If you don't have enough money to participate in the system, it's all good. We'll give it to you. So this is how I see things unfolding. And the repercussions of that is, it's not allowed to be talked about on some platforms, which is discouraging in this year 1984 that we live in. Ransom? Oh, it's 11-11-23. Yeah, 11-11-22-3-223. I should have had it wired down to 11 seconds. Damn.
Well, at least it ain't 762. It's just 223.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. No, you know what? I was going to tell you, we're always talking about food production and natural things that's going on. And I've always got my mind on headlines and what's going on around the world. And I wake up the other day and I go outside and I check the mail, and I get a letter from my city telling me that, I'm in violation of all of these municipal codes, that I have, what they're calling weeds growing, which is actually edible plants, growing around my property. They're above 6 inches. So, I got to take care of that. And then I find out by looking at my security system that the city was over here, not just, randomly coming down the street and going, oh, well, we'll, give them a warning, give them a warning. No, the guy was literally going around to properties like mine. I know this about my property for sure, taking pictures, getting in the angles of the property so they could take pictures so that they could come up with violations to generate revenue. So they're checking the tags on all my vehicles. So they send me this letter that says, your RV, it needs to be registered. You can't store lumber, what they're calling, and I can't have boxes outside, which now what they're calling boxes are my flower beds or food beds. I have a lot of beds that I created in the last couple of years, and they have food growing on. Now, of course, right now in the winter, they look dead. So they're telling me, you can't have unused lumber in your yard or boxes or materials. And so I go read the statute, and basically it says that you're not allowed to keep anything that could help you maintain your property for free if it's in the public eye. So they're trying to tell me, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. And I knew this was coming, but think about all of these useless eaters, and I'm going to call them that, which no offense to government employees, but they're not producing as much as, say, people in the private sector are. However, they do go around and generate revenue. And then what they do is they know that some people may or may not have money to take care of the problems that they're, so you don't have somebody say to come drag the stuff off of your land, or I'm not going to do that. Of course, I'm going to use all the material anyway. But, they hit up all these people. And then what happens is they have to pay a fine. And if they don't pay the fine, they put liens on their property. So they start taking property. Now, what do you think is going to happen when there's more food shortages or less food available to the public? Well, more and more people are going to start gardening. And then they're going to be running into all of these rules that municipalities put out if they live in, the city limits, which is hindering their right to grow food. And it made me start thinking about it, kind of had an epiphany of what's actually going on in the Southwest. So, a couple of decades ago, say, thousands or hundreds of thousands of pounds or millions of pounds, I don't know what it is, of marijuana was coming over the border. Then all of the border states legalized marijuana, which means that they can all, they have farms all over. It's supposed to help with revenue with the state and to help with programs like schools and et cetera. Okay, that sounds fine. But then when you look at the reality of it, everywhere along the border, they're opening up dispensaries, like 12 or 13 or 14 of them in a really small or low populated area of mainly poor people. And then, well, that's okay. They could grow it themselves. They don't have to spend all that money, going to their stores. But they have laws that don't allow you to grow outside. So what they're doing basically is the same old scheme. And, I am pro-choice as far as things that you want to use of different things, so to speak. But when the government starts saying you can have it, but you got to buy it, it ends up being like the classic ghetto experience where you have pawn shop, liquor store. Now it's dispensary. And they're pulling in all of these poor people's disposable money, so to speak. But it's not really disposable. It's money they should be investing in, prepping for times ahead. But you can make the same argument towards food. The same things that allow you to grow your food outside are the same exact rules and regulations that these municipalities are enforcing for different reasons. Like I remember I lived in Maryland near Andrews Air Force Base in one of their housing things, and they had rules where you could not grow food on your property. You had to grow specific flowers that the homeowners associations all agreed looks good in the front, and certain types of trees. And, like, for example, I let a mulberry tree grow out one year. It took 3 years to grow it from a little sapling into a pretty large tree. And I was getting 15, 20 pounds of fruit off of that tree every 2 weeks. It would continue blooming and growing more berries on it, and I would shake them. And eventually they found out about that and they came to cut it down. So this attitude of the governments is to, hinder or make it hard for people to be self-sufficient. So you talk a lot about solutions. And I know you don't live in a municipality, but what do you think solutions are that people are going to have to transition to in this upcoming shortage of different things? How are they going to farm inside without electricity, for one, either because it's not on, or two, because it costs so much to them to use it that it's not a cost-efficient, cost-benefit equation for them? And, what are some solutions do you think are going to have to be for the millions of people? Because in my opinion, unfortunately, not to be a pessimist, but I think that there are hundreds of millions of people that are soon going to find out that there are not enough resources for everyone. And those people that live in these municipalities are going to be offered things like rations and really wild political decisions, which essentially are take from those who produce and give to those who don't, i.e. communism. And I see that playing out in Europe right now, with them cutting off all of the energy supplies, cutting off farming of local areas, so that there's no local source of foods. And all over the world, you see this illegal, or the government's trying to make it basically illegal to grow food. And then you slap on all of these natural things that are happening. You were talking about the Hunga Tunga and, the different effects that we're going to be having, extreme colds, extreme heats. When we're going into, obviously, the grand solar minimum, it's kind of no doubt that that's what's happening right now. How are these hundreds of millions, potentially billions of people going to feed themselves when rules, regulations, and circumstance are preventing them from doing it themselves?
Because there's more of us than there are of the overseers. Now, you can do this up to a certain point, and I get it. Whether maybe it's a power trip control thing or whatever, I get it. They can't grow this here. You got to make the neighborhood pretty. Flowers, would they know if you were growing edible flowers or not? But that's only going to go for so long. When people realize that they have to grow their food to survive, I don't care if you have somebody coming to the door, they're going to get a very stern, get out of here. And if it's a next door neighbor and a next door neighbor and a next door neighbor and across the street and across the street and across the street, and 8 homeowners come out and go, no, I don't care what you do. The financial system is going to be in tatters anyway. So the lien on the house, bring it on, because we're going to get a class action lawsuit against you in a civil service for violating rights. Don't go for the criminal. You got to go for the civil, so you can take their car, and then you laugh at them and say, hey, every day you go to work, you're working for us. I'll take part of your paycheck in the settlement, and you work for us on a civil suit side, because that'll be the damages. And take them to task, because these things are not only a constitutional right, but your God-given right to be able to even breathe air, exist, have water. At what point can they say at the very big, I could get it if you're growing tobacco on your land, okay. If you're growing, hemp or some kind of controlled substance crop, depending on which state you're in, okay. But to say that you can't grow a tomato, or you can't grow a fruit tree, or you can't even grow lettuce to feed yourself, that everything has to come through a system that's touched by taxes, at that point, that's taxation without representation, period, plain and simple. At the point that we're being told that you're not allowed to grow your own food, period, then it's time for us to say you no longer have authority over anything, period. Now get out. And the next time that they would come back with 4 or 5 inspectors, then instead of there being 8 households, there are 50 households. Because it's going to come to this point. Now, you have to go back in history, and the only reason I say it's going to come to this, not wild conjecture, but just read the stories from the Great Depression. You'll understand how revenuers at the time, as they were called, were just thrown out, kicked out, tarred and feathered, literally tarred and feathered. That's where that expression comes from. So this would be from the penny auctions, for an example. I'll just give you one quickie. The banks were foreclosing. There was no 30-year terms on the contract. Like, they could just call your note at any time. And that was the difference in the banking system then, which it's morphed into now, where they can confiscate your funds at any time. But back then in the 1930s, they could pull your banknote for the loan for your house at any given moment, slap it on the desk and say, you owe us the rest of it right this second. We're protected from that now, but we're not protected from bank bail-ins, which they steal all your cash to bail the bank out. But in the 1930s, after banks would say, the stock market crashed, we need all our capital back. You didn't give us our capital. Okay, that house is now ours. You have 5 minutes to get out. So the banks would repossess the homes, and then they would come out to the auctions. And the penny auctions would be an auctioneer from the bank that would go out to a farmhouse and start going, all right, who's going to buy Bob's house? And there are about 50, 100 people show up, beat them to a pulp. I mean, beat the tar out of them is an expression being so badly that you defecate yourself. Beating the tar out of them. All right, so they would beat the tar out of them, and then they would literally tar and feather. Roll them in oil, and then spread feathers after they rip somebody's pillowcase open and cover them in feathers after they were covered in oil. And then kicked and told to get down the road. You don't come back here, these houses, and they protected their own. And when that history chapter was over, those people who didn't sell their homes still owned their homes. Again, not leaving the home allowed them back to own the home after the Great Depression with the new deal, with the era, new laws to, protect people from quote unquote the banks after this. So those who stayed got to stay in their homes, but it took a neighborhood of people to make sure that they stayed in their homes. So are we at this era now where neighborhoods are going to have to come out and just tell whatever little county dog inspectors, you go back to your pound and leave. We're going to grow the food. There's nothing going to stop us going to grow the food. Like at that point, they realized that there's way, 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 way more citizens than there are any types of government bureaucracy people out there. Because really, it's coming down to the point we're coming into food shortages seriously. If you haven't seen the progression of what Ransom and I talked about for the last 2 years of when we were calling, things are going to double this year and triple. Okay, we already reached that back in 2021. We said it's going to double again, and we've already, we're at about a 4x increase from, say, 2018 in the food price right now, which is right in line with what we were talking about. It's going to get really, it's going to get expensive, but it's going to get non-available in this next stretch here. So people are going to grow their food. And this is why I was saying there's going to be a mass panic run for people to buy garden tools. There's going to be a mass tidal wave run on seeds and anything farm implement, garden hoses, any of this kind of stuff. Fertilizers, pesticides, anything like ortho type of thing. I don't really use that, but I'm more on a neem oil and kind of insecticidal soap natural guy, but that'll be bought out too. Once that tidal wave of people running to grow their own food, then the dog catcher and the photographer at night to tell you and the little kindergarten county inspector, Barney Fife out there, is going to have to go back to the office tarred and feathered. The tidal wave of buying and fear will be here for people to grow their own food, but when you're told you can't do that. At that point, then the social contract's broken. Literally, you're in a famine and the government's telling you can't grow food. That at that point, you've lost the right to rule anything or even control anything. You've lost it. Literally, you're at the point of insanity where you have no right to even assess the situation because it's so messed up that you're telling people you can't grow food during a food lean or a famine time or a food shortage. This is the insanity that it's going to have to come down face to face when these, Barney Fife inspectors come to your door or your yard. I could go off and I'm going to try to control myself here because, we've gotten to this point now where, your very existence of being able to stay alive is being pulled from under you, the rug. And Ransom, I could say one thing, man, if you're going to fight that one, I would love to follow it. That whole battle of you trying to prove in court that these flowers are medicinals, and here it is, the peer-reviewed research, 200 research reports deep on this one single species right here times 50 and everything in the yard. And you can't take away my right to create a habitat for pollinators and feed myself, these types of things, and improve the water soil composition. These are things I would love to follow it. If you're going to take it on, man, I would follow it and report on this. Yes.
Kind of wonder if I can't just put a sign up that says wildlife refuge, for the environment.
You got to make sure it's rainbow flag colored, though.
That's right. I support my flowers rainbow, spectrum there. It's okay. Think about this, though. Telling people not to grow food in a food shortage is kind of like maybe telling people not to medicate themselves when there's a pandemic. I'm just saying, does that, kind of parallel the world of backwards, up is down, down is up, and all of that. That's what I was talking about earlier. We're now in that phase of being punished or potentially, messed with for not believing the beliefs of other people, i.e. the local government, depending on what they believe, because they get to sit around in a little council and make decisions without anyone voting on it. And a lot of people think that their local town or municipality is democratic, and actually most cities are incorporated, and they hire a mayor and they hire a city manager or something like that. This is a person that is not accountable to voters, yet they make decisions for the municipalities that they're in. And how long do you think it'll be get worse in the Ukraine, and it spreads to other countries, and we actually see people being hungry and cold in Europe, kind of like World War II? Because a lot of people don't know how many people starved to death in World War II, and not just it had nothing to do with being shot or violence. They just didn't have food able to eat it, so they starved to death. So imagine what would be going on in Europe as the governments of Europe are jailing people for thought crimes, telling people they can't grow food, telling people they have to cut back on energy, and telling people that they have to accept more people in their little bitty town, even telling people that they have to move out of their homes and give it to someone else. When you start thinking about all of those things, you have to realize that there is a coordinated effort to reduce the populations in those nations. And those nations are half of what we call the Western world. So the only thing you have left with the rest of it is the United States, New Zealand, Australia, and Japan, South Korea. Now, if you've been looking into the changes over there, the same thing is going on. They're jailing people for thought crimes. They're getting, rules and regulations set up for the new world-style government. And it really is bizarre to me. If you look back in World War II and say you put all the flags in one corner that are supposed to be the Allied forces, and then you put all the flags in the other corner that were supposed to be the axis of evil, and you put those flags all together today and notice that the groups seem to be switched a little bit, not saying any country particular is bad, but if you think about it, on one side you have America, Germany and Poland and some of these other countries, along with Japan. And on the other side, you have China and Russia, which were allies in the last World War. And now they're not. Now they're the bad guys. So you just think about the way that they redesigned the map after millions of people were murdered and starved. And then also the cultural revolutions that took place in some of those countries after World War II. And just imagine the direction of the way it's going, countries that are trying to repeat those histories in Europe and the Western world. We already know how that turns out. Just go back a little bit in time to Venezuela. It wasn't a super great first world nation, but at least there was some commerce there, a little bit of freedom. People were eating. And now you have two classes, basically one of the party and the military. They eat good, dine good. Their children go out to nightclubs, live the good life. Meanwhile, people are still running from that country because of starvation and violence. And not only that, if you remember, zoo animals were eaten, pets were eaten. And then you look over into our country where people like Fauci are telling people, you might have to get rid of all your pets because they might, interfere with our program that we have going on, basically. And not only that, think about this. If things got extremely bad and somehow they talked the public into get rid of their pets, there would not be that second food source, emergency food source. I know I hate to say that, but that's what came to mind when I looked at China and I realized that they were ordering all of these pets destroyed, is that if they ever got locked in the building, say, maybe welded in or sent somewhere, and all they had was their pets, guess what they're going to eat? They're going to eat the other food source, the emergency food source. And I know it's bad or sad or maybe, a little bit mean to think about your best friend as a backup food source. But what do you think would really happen if the wildlife was reduced across the board? Freedoms to travel were reduced across the board. The right to grow food and produce things was reduced across the board. And all you were left with is what little bit of livestock and pets for hundreds of millions of people. Well, obviously they would eat those and use those for a meat market, which is exactly what happens in China all the time. But you notice the very first thing they did in 2020 was attack the food source reputation by saying this bad thing came out of a food market, right away attacking the food source. And this has been a common theme since, I'm going to say, 2020, which was the year that the occult became in plain view. 2020 in hindsight there. It's perfectly clear vision, where we got to see the plans of the elite. And what it's looking like, to me at least, in my opinion, is we are well into the culling of the population, something they bragged about, talked about, planned about, and expressed from Bill Gates all to the World Economic Forum. And you can go back in history, or you can pick your royals if you follow the royals. You remember what's his name said he wanted to come back as a virus and kill 99% of the population. These are the kind of people that are running the world, and they are not worried about telling you what they're going to do to you next. That's why, even though I say that mainstream media is twisted and maybe the facts aren't right, what is right about it is their threats, their everlasting, ever happening threat towards the public. And this is how they use this threat of fear of pick your subject, whether it's sickness, hunger, war, etc. The four horsemen of the apocalypse is what they want to show you. The four horsemen of the apocalypse is what they want to do. And they have to do this. Otherwise, this reset that all of these billionaires and world leaders and royals are all planning. This is not an argument. They tell us to our face. They plan on completely controlling every animal on the planet, tracking it, tracing it, and that includes the human being. And they're setting it all up right now. And it seems like you would say no, and we're going to fight it. But look at places like New Zealand, for example, one of a very free country, recognized around the world for being free. They had weapons to protect themselves. They had all of these things. But look at them now. This is a country that seems to have been beaten, browbeaten, and folded to it. So did Australia and Japan and South Korea and the United States, and almost every European country in recent years has folded to things that you would never think they would fold to. You'd never think these things would happen, but yet they did. And now they're telling you that you're going to have to get used to rationing and less food, less energy, less lifespan. And that's, I think, what's going on. And you talk a lot about solutions. The only solution, I think, is for everyone in the world, or at least say 1 billion out of the 8 billion people on Earth, to recognize this and start changing how they live, what they use to vote with their dollar, like with the companies that they buy. Like recently, I got to get a glimpse inside the hiring practice of some of the companies. In other words, the training. And it's all about how, basically, to put it mildly, if you're a white male, a straight white male, you are bad and you shouldn't have a job. And everybody else needs to learn how to deal with everybody. And at the same time as telling everyone that they're exactly the same, they tell you how many differences there are and how you can't talk about it, or they're telling you how to behave and all of that just so you can get a low-paying job. You have to conform to the new style of politics, which is going to spread in every aspect. You see it in the government already the last couple of years. I would say if you flip through the pages of history and you stopped right about 2020, you'd wonder what happened to everyone. Did some kind of magnetic anomaly completely changed the thinking of everyone on the planet, why they went crazy. Like I said, we literally have a zombie apocalypse, something they portrayed in media for 20 years now. You can go outside and see it if you live in any major metropolis in a first world United States, supposedly the leader of the free world. Go downtown somewhere. Like I bet it doesn't matter which state you're in. I can go to Albuquerque, El Paso, Tucson, Phoenix, in my area. But say you live up in the Northeast, you know, you got New York, Boston, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., you got Detroit, Chicago, L.A., San Francisco, I don't want to say the nickname, but, you know, and you remember recently that they were crying about the droughts and all the poop on the sidewalk and the needles everywhere. Well, don't worry about it, because all of that water washed that stuff into fields and out into the ocean. So imagine the repercussion you're going to hear about happening in California when all those people that were wading around in the floodwaters, basically poop water, are going to find out they have hepatitis and all kinds of weird diseases because they lived basically just in a city where, remember, those government people are there to protect you, and they're there to manage things, and they're there to make the rules, and they're there to make all the codes and enforce all those codes. But seemingly simultaneously, they don't care about civilization at all. Otherwise, those things wouldn't be getting out of control. Meanwhile, they're still bothered to go to working class citizens that pay taxes and own their properties and try to revenue collect from them even more, and then pay for these programs that are increasing the situation, which is all setting up, I might add, for a total collapse of civilization once there is any kind of food shortage of any real amount where people start to go hungry. Because all of those social programs are going to dry up first. And it's already been happening. I've been keeping track of that since about 2020. All of the food banks are under their food. They've been empty for about 2 years. And imagine how those things, those kind of charities that are the safety net of civilization, are going to dry up when we come into this new phase that we're doing now.
Yeah, that's a great statement there. The civilization net of society. Well, the civilization net is going to be a little bit different for everybody. I'm sure it's not the same in Switzerland as it is here. Other parts. Think about the civilization safety net for the Southern Hemisphere countries that are going to, A, lose their crop production and their main export revenue sources. But the entire way that people will do agriculture will change, and if the UVB gets as intense as it is, they won't be able to go outside, and they'll have to completely restructure the time as being outdoor because the UVB would be that heavily damaging. You go out for just minutes and have, 3rd-degree sunburn on you. These changes are real. They're here, but they're going to be economic in addition to hunger. And governmental bodies still trying to control everything on the way down and extract as much wealth and resource as well at the same time. So, I'm trying to show at different points that this thing is absolutely in play here. So as we spoke about earlier, just so you can get a good timeline of when. So the first part of the program, I talked about this mesospheric ice crystal eruption and then the ozone breakdown, which is going to be a catastrophic runaway ozone depletion event, which will expand the ozone hole August, September, October, the biggest that's ever been, past even that, and there'll be measurable UVB crop destruction and different changes. Sea ice changes will go to zero probably, or very close to it. But at the same time, all of that's happening. That's just because the ice crystals in the upper atmosphere at 30 to 50 miles above the head. The other part of the eruption that I was talking about, that Hunga Tonga eruption added 10% more moisture into the atmosphere in a single one-day event. We had 100%, and that's all the clouds there were, and that's all the water there was to make clouds in the atmosphere, and that was it until Hunga Tonga, and it just added plus 10% of all the amount of water that could make clouds in the atmosphere. Now, most of this is going to be sandwiched down at the 20-degree north or 20 degrees south latitude. The eruption occurred there, so the southern hemisphere should have the most effects in terms of additional rainfall. But as that transits over the equator in the northern hemisphere, since we're in winter, the effects here should be hail. So comparing hail events, which is a signal of more moisture in a different kind of temperature band, would be hail and snow in northern hemisphere. Southern hemisphere, since they're in the summer months or going at the end of summer here, it'll be floods, massive floods, huge floods. So let me read you. I'm over here on the Watchers, and it's one of my favorite sites because they compile different types of stories. So floods, North Queensland communities bracing for isolation after widespread floods in Australia. That's more record floods on top of more record floods on top of more destroyed cropland, and that's why New South Wales and Queensland were down 33% on their barley production this last year, and that is going to continue. So there's one plus on the floods. Paraguay communities cut off by flooded rivers in Ama Bay. And we're talking as far as the eye can see, water, and it would be croplands. But they just came out of a massive part of a drought up there too, which is interesting. It switched from drought into unbelievable. Now it's a sea, inland sea, and one day it's a drought, the next day it's an inland sea. Like these kind of extremes. Heavy rains in Brazil. Southern Malawi hit by massive flooding, and Malawi is southern Africa. Like we're next to Zimbabwe, just north of South Africa. Extreme rain in South Africa. Yes, thousands affected by severe flooding in southern Mozambique. And thousands of buildings in Auckland unsafe for living after the worst rains in 170 years. Well, that would make sense because the last time there was a lot of water vapor up there like this from the Tambora eruption was almost 200 years ago. And that's literally just from the first page as I'm scrolling in the flood section of those articles that I just read you that are visible on here. 70% are about the southern hemisphere and the floods. So this is one thing that you would be expecting as you move forward. And if you want to start to do verifying of earth changes upon us based on this here. So I'm going to continue with the floods here. I found the earth changes section, drop down menu here. I can't even spell. Maybe I can't spell. I'll give it to volcanoes, earthquakes. Okay, so in terms of earth changes, let me run a list down here of things that I would be looking for. Volcanoes increase because electromagnetic changes off the sun. Earthquakes, the same thing. Tectonics, Earth has to release extra pent-up current or charge in the earth because the sun's stepping down. The earth will equalize, thereby releasing outbound electric charge to the ionosphere and beyond. That would be volcanoes and earthquakes increase. Tsunamis, yeah, maybe hit or miss. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The landslides, the sinkholes, those are, and earth cracks, those are directly related to the magnetic intensity changing, this magnetic anomaly as we move through the four gas giants, flipping in and interplaying on their magnetic fields, and the sun. And we're going to pass through those two magnetic fields in 2024 of October. So that's another massive event that's going on that's out there that's in the known variables that's being plugged in, why there's so much fast change happening now. In 2023 is a massive ozone hole expanse. And then right in 24, we're going to go right into this supermassive magnetic anomaly. And who knows what's going to happen in the hemisphere of the brain. Ransom, you were just talking about zombies occurring because the way we perceive information. Well, there's going to be landslides and the Earth's going to pull. We're going to have bridges, railroad disruptions, etc., conduits snapping and breaking. And I'm wondering how many of these fires are really conduit pulling away from the casing. And there's it's usually a wrapped wire, so it's neutral, but wham, then suddenly there's an overcurrent in there and there's some sort of short out. I mean, these things are all connected there, specifically at height coming in. So October of 2024, these 5 things will be at their absolute maximum. Volcanic eruption intensity and how many. Earthquakes, the magnitude shall increase. The landslides, you're going to hear more about that, and bridges pulling away from their banks. sinkholes, which you've seen, I don't know, countless amounts of, and earth cracks, all related to electromagnetic activity on the crust of our planet, measurable, and we're going to come into something magnificent in October of 2024. Now, the extreme cold, I was looking for the floods. Where's the floods? I don't see the floods. I guess I'll go with ice and snow if anybody doesn't mind. This will increase the heat wave flip-flop of ice. Okay, like I was saying, if there's more atmospheric precipitation in there and chance of it getting to be in the atmosphere 10% more, then we would expect almost every precipitation record, ice storms, snowstorms, hailstorms, and also rainfalls to increase by 10% over the maximum ever in history ever, plus 10%. So here we are, record-breaking snowfall hits Anchorage, Alaska. Historic Sierra Nevada snowpack brings all-time record snowfall, snow depths in California. Sierra Nevada's California, all-time snow depths. Highest level since 1990, or not highest, measurable since 1995. Widespread ice storm, 550,000 without power. Ransom alluded to that in the beginning of the show. Extremely heavy snows in Japan. Now, this is the set. They had the highest and densest snowfalls in 400 years, 2 times this year already, and broke every record back. One was 390-year-old record, Hokkaido, which the temple apparently kept records over there. And where was the other? It was a 400-year record on. Was it Kyushu Island? No, it was further north. Buffalo hit by most devastating winter storm on record. That was in December. Oh, piling up snow at here it is. Record-breaking snow in Japan, followed by snow piling up to heights. So you start to see this extremes coming in the snowfall. The ice storms were increased by 25% over the EU the last year. So there's a lot of verifiables that there's more moisture, there's going to be more changes in the weather, there's going to be more effects that are going to be felt. So follow the crop seasons and know when the crop losses will come at the harvest season. They won't put the true numbers in for another month after that, but you can get a good indication on getting yourself more prepared so when the prices spike after that, you will have front run the food price spike. Now, after during the harvest time, prices generally drop, but they might only drop for a very, very, very short amount of time this year before people realize that, oops, it wasn't as nearly large of a crop, and then it'll skyrocket again. But just generally, prices drop coming into the harvest season. There's just a lot of it around. But then the next year, when they realize that, oops, that didn't really go so well this year, prices will probably just stay elevated. But at least you can front run it at one time in the harvest season this time to get cheaper food at that time, and then it'll really spike up after that. So Ransom, I guess that's my call, and I'm just babbling now, talking about bolides coming in and thing. But there's provable just record-setting everything now to show that there's more atmospheric precipitation and mesospheric ice crystal clouds. So sign us out, man. I'm going to just sit here and listen.
Well, it looks like we need record-breaking food production from not only governments, but just regular people about time. It's the time for record-breaking prepping and thinking and educating yourself on what to do in different situations. I have been lucky not to have been in an area that's been, messed up by any kind of natural disaster or anything. That's because I live in a spot that's, it's not geologically active. There's no hurricanes. There's no tornadoes. The worst that we might get here is high winds, freezing, unless the earth livens up again. I would be surprised, or not surprised rather, if we don't start seeing new, geologic activity happening in places that it hasn't happened in a long time. Like, for example, all over New Mexico, something 5,000 years ago, right around here, had a lot of geologic activity, and there was volcanoes popping up and pouring lava out all over the place here. They're easy to see. So what would it have been like to live back then, 5,000 years ago in the Southwest when all these things were happening everywhere? It seems like no matter how you look at it or which time period you want to go back to, all the way to millions of years ago to ape-like creatures, they were having these environmental emergencies happening, where the only people that survived obviously were those that were prepared or lucky, those that figured out new technology or couldn't adapt. So we're in one of those times definitely that we need to adapt to a new type of civilization while hiding in this civilization, because it's kind of like that movie, the Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Once people realize that you're prepared, or you know what's going on, or you have different opinions, you'll get this screeching sound from not only the powers that be, but from the sheeple that follow them. So it's time to break away from the sheeple civilization, back to the people civilization, and record-breaking, positive things. Because I know that the potential is out there, and like you said, there is enough people out there to counteract the little group of elites that actually run things. Now, whether or not they have the power financially, as far as resources and militaries and things like that, I don't think it matters, because if the Earth or the sun decide that we are really going to reset on its schedule, not our schedule, I don't think there's anything that any government in the world can do to stop that. So the only answer would be to do what every, ancestor of ours did that survived, that continued on to make our civilization now. Obviously, these things keep happening, and some people are okay, but vast majorities of the population are not okay. So I guess it's about that time to, like you said, think of solutions that will ensure not only you for the foreseeable near future, but possibly civilization or your family line into the far future. We are the ones that control the present. It's just that, most of the 8 billion people on the planet are so far indoctrinated and out of phase with the idea of self-sufficiency and choice, that we need to wake them back up. And it's becoming increasingly harder to do that with the, tech giants trying to kettle the people that give out information or ideas or question the narrative. So I think every single person should start doing their part as far as, doing a little bit of prepping, helping your neighbors, maybe change their mind into doing it also, because in the near future, if you don't have a community to fall back on, you are high and dry and alone. And we've talked about lots of different scenarios where it's really hard for someone or a family unit to navigate a world that's falling apart. So we definitely have to start finding out these solutions that will protect our generations into the future. If that's a good, direction to go on the outro there. What do you think? I mean, we have the potential, we have the resources, we have the knowledge. It's just whether or not we can have a new type of Renaissance era to get normal people and the sheeple involved in that future, and to take the wheel on their own decisions and life-making choices.
Yeah, you said it. Their own personal choice for life-making decisions. There's a lot of people who are never going to make that choice. You have to understand that there's a certain amount of people that will never change, even if the tidal wave's spilling over the mountain. I mean, I myself, I'd stand there and watch because it'd be such a beautiful thing, but people are people. Some will come, some will not come. That old adage, you can take a horse to the water, but you cannot make it drink. It's the same with this information flow and the information contained within. There are people who, I don't care if they see it falling apart, they'll still be like, they can't rationalize it, or B, they just don't care to even get ready. It's not that they're going to party till 1999. It's just like, I just really don't care. I'm just going to take it the way it is, whatever. And that's probably a good 20% of the population or more. So you're going to get different variants of people acting on the information, and the vibrational frequency that's put out by you trying to get prepared. You're going to draw those same like minds and that same vibratory pattern thinking person. As you think, you create the vibration of that thought, whether it be high vibration love and light, or very low vibration of hate and these sort of, downtrodden, very low vibration fear, these types of things. So you're going to vibrate out there into the universal field, if you will, and those of like energies are going to pull toward themselves electrically. And it's been like that. Well, how do you think The Secret works? How do you think Think and Grow Rich works? How do you think the teachings of the richest man in Babylon work? These things are known that vibratory patterns connect to each other. So during this time, I think they're going to be enhanced, and I think you're going to find the right people to be around that want to survive, thrive, and move through and be the change for the next world. But at the same time, those who don't want any type of change or just want to go down with the ship, they're going to all coalesce together as well in their own. So there shouldn't be that much competition. They're going to, wrap into their own cell, and literally like a cell of an organism that's just going to wait until the end and not do anything, not compete with your resources. But those who want to, make the world a better place and cooperate, they're going to draw toward each other. And obviously, two or three of them get together, and then it becomes a larger amount of pull. And eventually, you'll find your communities. We'll all find each other in the end, which is just the beginning. We appreciate you watching. Ransom, thank you for joining me tonight. Ransom Godwin, I've been talking with here. Mountain High Time.
Thank you for listening
DuByne
to
signing off.
Revolution